Hello to everyone on my Starlit Stories channel. The story began on that late autumn evening when twilight had already fully descended over the forest and the road leading to the old house had become a winding ribbon of dark asphalt, and a fine rain fell like thin threads. Her name was Anna. She was driving not out of teenage curiosity nor for thrills, but because the house in the woods belonged to a long-deceased aunt whose existence had almost been forgotten. The property papers and the deed were found by chance among old papers, and Anna did not want the place to rot into oblivion. She expected no mysticism, she only wanted to spend one night to feel the house breathe, to see if it could be restored. On the way she passed rare homes with lights already out and heard the wind stir the tall pines. When she finally turned off the main road onto the narrow dirt track, the radio filled with static and her phone lost signal. This was usual in remote places, but that night the lack of connection felt especially palpable, as if the silence of the forest demanded that no one disturb its sleep. The house stood in a small clearing where the trees formed a kind of circle, and it looked as if human footsteps had long forgotten it. Peeling paint, a roof with holes, windows curtained in cobweb. There was no deliberate hostility, more an invitation. Enter if you dare. Anna stepped out of the car, shut the door and listened. Nothing, only the rain and the rustle of dry leaves. She pulled her coat tighter and took her keys. They trembled in her hand, not from the cold but from anticipation. 08005600. Inside the house she was met by the smell of old wood and dust, in which the scents of other lives were hidden: worn furniture, old books, a faint trace of perfume that probably belonged to people whose names had already faded. The hallway was long, with a ceiling light that barely glowed. Several black and white photographs hung on the walls, the faces in them seeming to look straight into her eyes. She switched on her torch and entered the living room. There stood a piano covered in a thick layer of dust, and on it lay an old sheet of music, the first bars of some melody. Anna drew closer and, unable to resist, gently pressed a key. The sound came out muffled, like a door left ajar. At that moment something rustled softly outside, and her heart responded with a quick thud, but it was only the wind playing with dead branches. She set a lamp on the table and moved through the house, peeking into rooms one by one. A kitchen with a rusty tap, a bedroom with an old bed frame, a child's room with toys left mid-play. Every room carried the sensation of an interrupted life, as if the people who lived here had been forced to leave suddenly and had forgotten to close the door behind them. In the bedroom she found a drawer with documents, letters, faded newspaper clippings and a diary. The diary belonged to a woman named Elena, who wrote about small things, the weather, tea parties, and a little boy who loved to listen to the clock strike midnight. One page had a note with a date: 20 years ago there had been a severe fire in the village, and many moved away afterward, leaving the house behind. The letters showed attachment to the place and painful hints that strange rustlings would come at night. Anna sat on the edge of the bed and read aloud a few passages, and with each line it seemed the house listened more attentively. Outside the wind grew stronger, and somewhere below she heard a creak, as if someone had walked across the attic. She climbed the stairs. The boards complained under her feet. The attic was high and spacious under the roof, full of trunks draped in cloths. She opened one and found a small music box, the very one that played the melody recorded on the sheet. Holding the box, she turned the key. The tune sounded quiet and piercing, and suddenly everything in the room seemed to hold its breath. When the music stopped, a dull groan sounded below, like an old door opening after long neglect. Anna went downstairs and, not wanting to be alone, lit candles in the candelabras in succession, leaving thin strips of light behind. Candlelight threw long shadows on the walls, turning photographs into animated silhouettes. The close darkness did not frighten her at first, rather she felt a special attentiveness from the house, as if it wanted her to feel comfortable before revealing its secrets. At one point the lamp flickered and Anna realized the electricity was unstable. She went to the fireplace and found an old calendar on the wall, a page cut out from the very day 20 years ago. On the shelf sat an old alarm clock, its hands stopped at 12. Anna felt a subtle tension, not fear, but the beginning of understanding that time in this house was somehow warped. She returned to the diary and read more carefully, noticing how the author's entries shifted between everyday matters and strange mentions of someone who sings at night and shadows that come at midnight. The more she read, the clearer the image of the little boy emerged, the one who loved the music box and cried in the nursery at night. At the bottom of the diary a line stated, "If I do not hear it, I will leave." Those words sounded almost prophetic. Night deepened. By the end of the first part of the night, Anna set up a small portable recorder to capture the house's sounds, as if she wanted to fix its voice. She placed it in the living room with the music box and started recording. Her phone's clock read nearly 12 when she heard something that was neither wind nor random noise, a faint, childlike humming, barely distinguishable, as if from far away. As if through thick glass. Anna stirred and grew cautious. As an adult, she knew it might be residual sound within the house, but her heart would not accept mere banalities and quickened. She recorded a minute, then another. The humming grew closer, as if someone were step by step approaching the door. Suddenly the sound cut off. Anna froze. Then a new noise followed, steps, but not human steps, more like claws over old wooden stairs. She remembered the recording and, wanting answers, went to the furthest room where, according to the diary, the boy liked to play. The nursery door was ajar when she pushed it, air escaped smelling of old dust and milk. Toys were scattered, a teddy bear, a one-eyed doll, a tin toy car. On the floor by the window lay a small jar filled with tiny paper boats. Little handprints were pressed to the glass as if someone had stood and watched outside. Anna pressed her palm to the pane. The glass was cold like winter. At that moment a soft tapping sounded on the wall, not steady, but rhythmic, like counting. She turned and saw the hallway clock's hands had shifted back. The hands were still set to 12, but their position seemed slightly warped, as if moved by someone in a dream. Suddenly the scent of children's perfume filled the room, sweet, warm, like cookies and baked apple. Anna realized something in the house was trying to summon memories. She closed her eyes and let herself recall snippets from the diary. The child's laughter, a woman's voice, a whisper that calmed the night's anxiety. Then, as if on cue, a rustle ran down the corridor and a movement flashed in the corner. A shadow that belonged to no object. Anna stepped back and faced her reflection in an old mirror by the door. A dim face, tired eyes, and in the reflection something else, someone small standing behind her. She felt her breathing steady and slow, as if trying not to attract attention. She took an old throw from the closet and covered the music box to mute the tune that seemed to awaken the house. But the music had already saturated the air and the walls. The night thickened and events grew denser. There were signs the house wanted to be heard, not only through creaks and rustles but through scents, chill, and light clinging to candle flames. Anna noticed candle flames sometimes lean to one side as if an invisible passerby breathed on them. She started writing her observations in a notebook, trying to keep a rational record. Once, when she paused to catch her breath, she thought she heard the music box melody echoed in the kitchen. Now the voice was near. She crept to the kitchen door and peered in. A figure stood in a haze, indistinct and thin like a rough trace of steam. The figure turned and then dissolved as if it had evaporated. On the table lay a photograph, the boy from the diary. Anna picked it up and read the note on the back, "Return my music." The words were simple and direct, carrying both a plea and reproach. She understood the house asked not for demolition or renovation but for memory. It asked for its song to be played. Anna tried to leave, thinking to drive to the nearest town and return with help, but each time she reached the door the corridor seemed to lengthen and the way out grew farther. Like a loop. The house was not merely a physical structure, it was a vessel of time, and those who entered it at night found themselves in a different tempo. The photographs on the walls began to change subtly. A person with an umbrella in an old frame turned their head and now looked in a different direction. Inside, clocks ticked irregularly with delays, giving the sense the world around lost its axis. She returned to the living room and replayed her earlier recording. On it lay layers of silence, wind, then a childlike wail that shifted into a whisper, "Do not leave." Anna realized this was not merely the story of former residents but of attachment that could not depart. The longer she stayed, the clearer it became that the house held the souls of those who had loved it and now demanded their music back. A moment of hope arrived when she decided to play the piano. Her hands trembled but she sat and, following the notes in the diary, began to play. At first awkward, the sounds smoothed into motion, and with each bar the house seemed to exhale. The melody carried lines of grief, reproach, and childish joy. On the third phrase a faint light arose as if generated by the music itself. Shadows on the walls danced and Anna glimpsed the house's memories, tea parties, voices, laughter. A small boy's figure appeared at the doorway, hazy without sharp features, with moist eyes. He listened unmoving. Anna continued, each chord drawing time's substance from the walls and thinning the atmosphere. When the melody faded, the boy placed a doll on the piano and slowly dissolved, leaving a warm impression on the keys. Relief came with a new pull. The house seemed grateful but requested more. In the diary she found an instruction: do not play if you are not ready to share the nights. She asks for more than a tune, she asks you to tell her about yourself. Anna pondered what that might mean. Perhaps the house wanted someone to tell it of life outside its walls. New stories to replenish the old, and in this circle memory survives. She began speaking aloud about her childhood, her fears, what she loved, and the more she shared the livelier the house became. The house answered not in words but with a soft creak of the floor, as if nodding. That night moved between light and dark, music and silence, memories and new truths. There were tense moments. Footsteps at 3 in the morning, doors closing on their own, shadows flitting behind curtains. Yet most phenomena felt less like threats than attempts to be heard. At times Anna mused on the house's nature. Was it itself, or did remnants of people live within it? In the diary she found Elena's poems calling the house a place where time whispers. The phrase lodged in Anna's mind and she accepted that her task was not to escape nightmares but to listen and translate them into story. Every time deep silence fell she grabbed the recorder and listened. Layers of sounds revealed wind, tree creaks, someone shifting, and sometimes clear tones that resembled human voices. She assembled them into a picture. The fire 20 years ago, a family trying to save what they could, a boy lost in the chaos, a music box never found a melody, the house continually sought. Dawn found the house calmer. Outside, daybreak smeared the sky. Anna had not truly slept but dozed in a chair, tired and content. She felt that the first night had brought order. The house proved it could hear. Still, the night was not finished and there was a sense this story was only beginning to unfold. With first light she inspected the grounds and found an old well guarded by an angel statue missing its nose. At its base were children's drawings, poems and notes left by neighbors, acts of remembrance for those who had gone. She spent the day cleaning, straightened rooms, fixed a rusty tap, cleared cobwebs. The house responded as if softened, the air lightened and familiar scents returned, fresh bread, warm spice. She felt she was forging a fragile pact, She would care for the house and it would share its stories. But as the day stretched into evening, tension rose again. It was as if the house, in response to her attempt at friendship, prepared a new test. In the diary, a new detail emerged. One night when the clock stopped at 12, neighbors saw light pouring from the house and heard unforgettable music. A neighbor went to seek the truth and never returned from the woods. Each diary line fed the sense that the house attracted, not merely preserved, and Anna realized it wanted not only to keep the past but to connect it with the present. Nearing midnight, the same melody filled the air again, now deeper and pushing through walls and along floorboards. A shadow appeared in the living room's corner, this time not childlike but upright and nearly human. It stood in the doorway watching Anna. In candlelight, the shadow resembled a woman in a long dress, her head tilted to one side, face unclear with hollow eye sockets. Anna's voice trembled, but she kept playing, shifting from melody to something like a prayer. Music became a bridge, and as the final notes dissolved, the shadow drew nearer without threat. It brushed the air, and the contact brought cold but not cruelty. Anna felt a light touch on her palm, feathery, and heard in her mind, "Return my music." She understood this plea came not only from the little boy but from all who had lived here. The house wanted its song to continue. She decided to stay another night, now with the clear intention to fulfill the request more fully. She found an old score in the house's archive, a whole cycle of melodies. That night she played until her fingers ached and the notes dissolved into the air. Then the house answered. It began to open cupboards and reveal things it had kept silent about. Old confession letters, photographs of people on happy days. Colorful drawings children made when it was warm. Memories returned softly and filled the once empty places. Yet each returning memory brought with it a trace of loss. Some could not remain and left with the world. Anna sensed the house's soul was like a net in which knots were people and threads were the music they left. If a thread snapped, the house painfully sought a way to mend it. Days passed in this exchange. She gave the house its music, and it gave back faces, voices, stories, and grief. She knew she could not restore everything but tried to preserve what she could. One evening, amid whispers, she heard a powerful sob, not childlike, not wholly feminine, a cry of grief. The diary noted a woman who had once lost her child and no music could soothe her sorrow. Anna understood that this wound could not be healed by music alone, it needed forgiveness. She read aloud a note where the woman begged forgiveness for failing to protect her child, and repeating the words she felt the air's density shift. The cry softened and dissolved, leaving only Anna's footsteps in the quiet. She recognized the house had granted her the right to forgiveness because she had listened. Not all stories were sorrowful, some were about joy, and those sounds returned as warm waves. The balance held until she noticed something still unresolved. A corner, a room beneath the house the diary did not reveal. It was the room under the kitchen, a dark niche beneath the stoves no one opened. The cellar smelled of lilacs and bitterness. Tiny dolls lay arranged in corners and a circle of ash lay on the floor. On the wall a faint inscription read, "She left, but she will return." Anna felt the house hold its breath. She realized this was the core of its longing. She descended with a flashlight that only revealed part of the space. Nothing alive remained, but the sense of presence was so dense it felt the room itself watched. In the center of the circle lay a sealed music box wrapped with an old ribbon. She could not say why she had not seen it before. Carefully she opened it. Inside were photographs, a worn handkerchief, and a tiny locket bearing a woman's image. A scent escaped, warm and mournful, calling to mind summer, tea and the ache of loss. Anna took the locket and, following hints in the diary, set out for the place in the house where the song of return was said to always sound. She placed the locket on the piano and played again, But now the music carried not only forgiveness but a promise that someone would return someday. At that moment a faint knocking echoed from the corner. Anna paused the music and listened. The knock repeated. Slow, steady steps approaching. Something came to the piano and touched the locket. For an instant she saw the woman's shadow clearer. This time she lifted her head, and in her eyes there was not a hollow void but a thin sown in sorrow. The woman smiled, and in that smile was no malice, only gratitude. Then, like a signal, ragged beams of light slipped through the shutters. Cracks and shapes of those once living flickered within them, people frozen in photographs. Children with dolls, elders talking over cups of tea. They did not speak, but their presence felt warm and calm. As Anna watched, the shadows gathered into a stream and moved toward the window. When dawn finally scattered the night, they stepped out and without looking back dissolved into the morning air, leaving for the place where memories go when they are accepted and forgiven. The house quieted, but it was a different quiet now, not tense but serene. Anna felt exhausted and fulfilled. She knew not everything was solved. Some things in the house would remain forever, but the knot had been loosened and holes appeared where light could pass. 56:0064:00. In the last hours before leaving, Anna walked through the house, touching each object like an old friend and whispering promises into the palm. I will return. She took the diary and added her story, new lines about music, forgiveness and the importance of listening. Before closing the door she turned and looked back. The house stood in the distant shade of the trees, but now it looked different, not gloomy and abandoned, but like a place that had weathered a storm and continued to live. She carried the boy's photograph in her pocket, the one she had found, and felt a gentle touch on her shoulder as if the house reminded her, do not forget us. She nodded and stepped onto the road where the rain had eased. The way home seemed shorter. In the distance birds cried out. Anna did not know if the same would happen on her next visit, nor whether the shadows would return, but she understood the main thing: the house was not evil. It was an early witness of human life, and when someone came and gave it a new melody, it replied in kind, returning memory and granting forgiveness. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a figure standing at a window on the roof, the silhouette of a woman bowing her head, and then it slowly faded. Anna did not cry, she smiled, because in that smile was room for both sorrow and gratitude. Back in the city's noise she again heard the call of modern life, phones, cars, voices, but inside her the house's music lingered, quiet and solemn. Like a promise to keep and protect what was given. This story could end by saying all mysteries were resolved, but life rarely simplifies so neatly. Some houses keep things that only need to be heard in time. Some songs will find their listeners again. Anna knew she would return, and when night fell again and the forest silence lowered, she would bring a new melody and the house would open its windows like hosts welcoming guests. Thus ended one night in an abandoned house in the woods, not as a final full stop but as one of the pages that turns scattered voices into a shared song. And if you ever find yourself on a road that turns left off the main highway and feel the urge to go down it, know this: some houses value not your silence but your stories. Do not be afraid to come if you come with respect and a